Good evening. Welcome to the August 17th, 2020 meeting of the Stillwater City Council. This time I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll ask you all to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll jump right into our agenda here at item 3, which is the consent docket. We've got meeting minutes, a water line easement, and an amendment to a service agreement with SASA. Councilors, any questions, comments, or motions on the consent docket?
Motion to approve the consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Teresa, could you please call the roll?
Mayor Joyce,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Darlington,
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti,
Yes.
Councilor Wedlake,
Yes.
Councilor Jaloski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. Item 4 is public comment on items not scheduled for public hearing. Let me check my filings here. I think all of these are on items not for public hearing, so we'll go ahead and get started. If you're here in person, you can come up to the podium over here to speak, and if you're online, they'll set you up as soon as I call your name. First one I have on top is Sean Walls.
Hi guys. First off, I want to thank every one of you for your time. My name is Sean Walls. I own 2 fine establishments here in Stillwater, the Great White Buffalo and the Union that is on the Strip. I call myself a local. I was born here right down the road at Stillwater Medical Center, and I graduated from Oklahoma State. As students were planning on coming back and making their arrival back to Stillwater, us bar owners and managers got together, teamed up with the city to try to get the best possible plan for student safety. As many of you guys have seen that 6-second video clip from the Union, that looks like my establishment fell short. Not because I was being negligent of safety or disobeying the rules and regulations, but simply falling victim of a perception of a 6-second video clip. The perception of that video portrays that my management and I are reckless and careless of human safety, but that is not true. The reality behind that short and localized video clip is that we are following every recommendation from the state and the city level. We too are learning every night in real time on ways to be more productive with the student population, especially when it comes to social distancing. I wish somebody had the magic wand that we could all wave in this room to fix the problem, and we could all move forward, but that's just not the case. I want to touch on one thing real quick. A short video footage has been the catalyst to some major uproars without an accurate representation of the whole situation. As city officials and owners of small businesses, we fall victim of that more than we probably should. I want to ask all of you here today to not make a drastic political move based on the power of social media. I'm speaking for everybody in this community that has poured their heart and soul into their local businesses, that fear that the state and city level could change their life in one emergency shutdown. I'll end with this. Nobody in this room wants this problem to go away more than I do. Finding a solution is more complex than just shutting down our small businesses. Students will continue to find ways to gather in unregulated spaces that will start a whole range of other problems and issues throughout our community. This pandemic is bigger than that. Please don't start targeting the bar scene and the restaurant scene just to take a stab at calming the public eye. I understand everybody is frustrated as much as I am. I do not want videos like that going out portraying that I'm not being serious or taking this pandemic very seriously, because I am and my staff is too. We are here to help. We are here to continue to be totally transparent with the city, with the state, with anybody that wants to regulate and watch us. We want to assure you that we are doing everything that we possibly can to keep our public and students safe. That's all I have today, and I appreciate you guys listening to it.
Thank you, Sean.
Yep.
You did a good job, but I failed to mention that we do have a 3-minute limit for speakers in this section. It doesn't look like our countdown clock is up there, but we'll yell at you if you go over 3 minutes. Next up is Cheryl Cummings.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Cummings. I live on Tanglewood Circle here in Stillwater. My brother and I are the current owners of Willie's Saloon on Washington Street. I want to thank you for hearing us out, and I appreciate the opportunity to work together to protect our community. In the last few days, there has been an increase in community concerns surrounding Washington Street. One of those concerns being the lines outside of our businesses. Bottom line, yes, we do have lines. We have lines because we are all following the capacity recommendations. We are not allowing the normal number of people into our establishments. So of course, there are lines, and most likely these lines are larger or longer than anyone is used to seeing. I have an estimation for you. Pre-COVID, on Washington Street alone, we could all accommodate for approximately 3,000 patrons at one time. With limitations on capacities and the second largest bar on Water Street temporarily closed, we can now accommodate for approximately 1,000 patrons, which leaves approximately 2,000 patrons either standing in line on the sidewalks of Washington Street or at an alternative location, such as a house party or other social gathering. I would hope that the council and the community members will recognize that the lines are a strong indicator that we are all following the recommendations and we are doing our part to protect our community. I will only speak for my business, but I know that the other owners have their own procedures they are following. At Willie's, we hire a professional service, virus control, that thoroughly cleans and fogs our entire building for COVID, amongst other viruses. This service is completed every 3 weeks. We have put policies into place with our staff for additional cleaning procedures throughout the evening and at closing and opening. Additional staff is scheduled to keep up with these demands. Face masks are provided and distributed to all patrons. Tables and chairs have either been removed and are arranged in order to promote social distancing. Staff is practicing extra hand washing procedures and hand sanitizer is readily available. We are providing an environment to take care of our patrons, both students and adults. We all are not only cleaning, but we continue to monitor underage drinking, overconsumption, and safety. I would hate to see what would happen if these patrons were not given a safe and clean environment to partake in their nightly socializing. In conclusion, prior to moving to Stillwater, I was a high school teacher in Wisconsin for 14 years with a master's degree in education. I understand the concerns and I respect those concerns. I know how important it is to keep our young kids in school at Stillwater Public Schools. I have a 5th and 7th grader, and our college students attending classes at OSU. But pointing the blame at us is not the solution. The solution lies in all of us continuing to work together, because I promise you all, shutting us down will not keep these people away from each other. At least when they are with us, we are controlling and monitoring them in a much safer and cleaner environment than what the alternative may be. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Cheryl. Next up, we have Crystalline Gray. You're going to pass? Thanks for being here. Next up, I have Chris Peters. I think Chris is online.
Hey, howdy, folks. All right, Chris Peters, 1116 West Thomas Avenue. It is my honor today to speak to you as the director of the Downtown Stillwater Association, Stillwater's Main Street America program. I want to let you guys know that Main Street has partnered with AARP to share best practices in commercial district design regarding COVID-19 response and management. I was so excited when I saw the Planning Commission pass Ordinance 3456 on leasing parking stalls for outdoor seating. Main streets here in Oklahoma and around the country have found that consumer confidence is higher when they can eat, drink, and shop outside during the pandemic. In a quick poll of the Safe Shop Stillwater Facebook group, I asked, would you use outdoor seating at your favorite Stillwater restaurants if available? Out of 200 respondents, 50% responded with a yes, 25% with a maybe, and the other 25% responded with a no. Not everyone enjoys eating outside, but I believe there are enough people who do, which frees up indoor space for those that don't. More formal studies have shown that parklets can benefit our economy and our health. Those are expanded spaces to make up for lost seating inside, increased foot traffic and attractions of customers, multi-business collaboration, and shared revenue. Parklets also encourage walking and biking in the area. They also allow for physically separate space from automobile traffic and other people. I appreciate this ordinance low-cost lease. Building a parklet with downtown's angled parking will require 3 or more spaces to be leased to create a high-quality parklet. Parklets can range from $5,000 to $20,000 to develop. Thank you for keeping these leases at a reasonable cost. To assist with these costs, Main Street Oklahoma has partnered with the Method Group, an architecture firm led by OSU graduates in Tulsa. Together, they created a placemaking program that allows our Main Street businesses to receive $2,000 to $4,000 in parklet and other streetscape design services at no cost. Ordinance 3456 is not perfect. I hope it can be updated to include more use cases. I don't see a reason to limit them to just restaurants and bars in specific locations around town. For example, a retail store might want to use that space for outdoor sales racks. An art gallery might want to use that space to feature appropriate outdoor artwork. I believe this is an opportunity for many businesses around Stillwater. Let's not limit ourselves in this creative use of outdoor space. Thank you for your time and your service to our community.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate your comments. Next up, I have Brian Langford Loftus.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and councilors. I quote unquote rise tonight in support of Ordinance 3456 as well, which provides our local businesses with the ability to expand their operations outdoors. I may echo some of what Mr. Peters just said, because many of my ideas did arise out of discussions with him and some other members of the chamber and in the business community about town. So it's important for me to say that I am speaking for myself, but it did come from some conversations with member businesses and the Chamber Government Affairs Committee. So that is to say, my name is Brian Langford Loftus of 1009 East Kraler Avenue here in Stillwater. To kind of talk about this ordinance, the pandemic has shown us that that it's not going away. But also cities have been doing something like this, the things that are described in this ordinance already for quite some time. And given the circumstances, this is also an opportunity. Tulsa has adopted a similar ordinance to this one, though based on how structured it is, I think program might be the better word. Adopting this resolution is an opportunity for our town to adopt policy that puts us on equal footing with other cities and towns. As the city reopened for business earlier this spring, there was a brief period of time during which business occupancy was limited by emergency mandate. Our businesses could open, but they were limited by, let's say, their square footage. We also would later learn that the indoor ventilation would be a risk factor for the spread of COVID-19. And until the state legislature can work out an alternative, our city relies heavily on sales tax revenues. Our city and our businesses both benefit from this opportunity, if we can call it that. In discussing this ordinance draft with members of our committee, some points arose that warrant further consideration. And so I would suggest some revisions to the ordinance during first reading tonight. I think these revisions would greatly increase access to the program and reduce some administrative burdens. To point out some specifics, in section 23, you'll have to forgive me on how to use sections and paragraphs and so on and so forth, but 23-270 Part 2 establishes certain blocks of Washington and Main Street for this program, as well as some blocks on the 100 blocks on 7th, 8th, and 9th Avenues, and other blocks designated by City Council. I would encourage a switch to a more descriptive qualifier, such as public streets subject to 25 miles per hour speed limit, or lower, as is the case with Tulsa's program. This would broaden access to the program while also decreasing burden on the council to consider new locations. Part 13 of 23-273 describes the lease and renewal terms, and to echo Chris Peters, I applaud the low cost of $10 per stall. On renewal process, the ordinance provides for a 6-month term with renewal available as determined from what seems to be a conversation between the owner or operator and the city manager. For the sake of simplicity, I would encourage the council to adopt a dedicated application and automatic renewal process. This would free the city manager's office from a regular bureaucratic parlay, and a simple initial application and subsequent notice of renewal with lease cancellation form attached would suffice, all of which can be handled conveniently and electronically.
Thank you, Brian.
Time's up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, apologies, but just to kind of wrap up, I think this is a great opportunity for Stillwater. Just with a couple of edits here and there, we could see a great opportunity for our town. I thank you all for the time.
Appreciate your comments. Thanks for being here. All right, that's everyone I have signed up for public comment. That will take us down to item 6 on the agenda, public hearings. First up is item 6A, receive public comment regarding a request for a map amendment to rezone property addressed as 503 South Pine Street from RTM 2-family and multifamily residential to RMI multifamily intermediate residential for use as a parking lot. This is CC-20-140. Mr. Dormer, did we have good notice on this item?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gross.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Lance Gross, Planning Manager for Community Development. The first application before you tonight is for a map amendment. It's a rezoning request from RTM 2-family and multifamily to RMI multifamily intermediate. And the reason why the applicant needs or wishes to do this is because they plan on removing the structure from the site and replacing it with a surface parking lot. RTM does not allow that, but RMI does. To give you an idea of what some of the zoning is around the site, the orange rectangle is a subject site, and you can see RTM is located to the south, to the west, and also to the east. RMI is located directly to the north, and that's the requested zoning. And to give you a general idea as to where this is located, it's approximately 3 blocks to the east from Westwood Elementary. It's north of 6th Avenue and south of 4th, and it's primarily where 5th terminates right at Pine. This is an aerial view looking to the northeast, and you can see 5th Avenue is right here, and Pine is here. These are apartments, and these are surface parking lots to the north and also to the east. The other 2 locations are single-family residential. And this is looking right from to the east at the property, and it's right at the intersection of Pine and 5th. Be happy to answer any questions.
Counselors, any questions for staff at this point?
Do you have a map or an idea of how many cars can fit in that parking space and how they will enter and exit? It's pretty
Nothing-
small space.
Yes, nothing has been submitted as of right now. But the applicant can probably answer that question a little bit better.
Lance, can you pull up the zoning map again?
Sure.
The existing zoning? So it shows that block directly, or that lot directly to the east of the subject property, that one right there, as RTM. But
Correct.
when I was looking at the site and looking at some of like the aerial photographs, that site is fully covered with parking lot directly behind the house.
That is correct.
Is that a non-conforming use right now?
Well, more than likely, however, it's the same property owner that owns this, and this. And they could come in and do a special exception through the Board of Adjustment to combine those two zoning districts to make it, all legal.
They could, but they haven't as of yet.
That is correct.
Do we know how a parking lot got built there if it's not zoned for a parking lot?
That's a great question.
Okay.
It's one of those things that it probably came in and they were probably, or they could have been told that, they can combine those two into one zoning district.
Any ideas how long that parking lot's been there? That one looks pretty new.
Yeah, it's pretty new. We can find out.
I'd like to, I mean, it doesn't have much bearing on this necessarily, but I think that zoning map at the very least we need to update, because that lot behind this subject property is not single family. It's a parking lot.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Councilors, any other questions for Lance? This time I will open the public hearing. We do have the applicant here to speak, Mr. Scott Petty.
My name is Scott Petty. I live at 5821 Trenton Avenue. Thank you all for your service to our community. My wife and I purchased this property 20 years ago as a rental property, and I never envisioned the desire to sell it. However, I noticed a house for sale about a block away, and I contacted the owner. It was a sorority, and they had purchased that house on Walnut for a parking lot that did not get approved by the council. And so when the owner explained to me their situation, I noticed my lot was actually larger than their lot. And so we have discussed a swap, a 1031 exchange. When I toured the home, it has been upgraded. It's very nice. My home is also very nice, but it is a much closer and much more safe location for the sorority to have a parking lot. And to answer Vice Mayor Darlington, I do know that the number of parking spots available on my property at 503 Pine are more significant than what they had. I think they were at 14 maybe on Walnut, and I know they're over 20 on the property that I have, which means there'll be less street parking for sorority members, which I think would be very favorable to the city and the neighbors. But we agreed that I would try to have the property rezoned, since there are already two parking lots on each side of that property, and parking is a premium around campus. So we have moved forward. I talked to Lance Gross, city staff, as well as the City Planning Commission, asked them before it went forth to the City Planning Commission if this would be something that could be approved, and or if this was something that was not typically done. And it was clear that with the two sides, the northern border and the eastern border of this property already having parking lots, that it quite possibly could work well. So I'll be glad to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Petty. Councilors, any questions? You're muted.
I'll just ask you that question, Scott. Are you going to connect all the parking lots?
That would be a question for the sororities. I know the sorority that owns the lots on each side of my property, I believe anyway, they're owned by the same sorority. So that may be something that they'll work out, but that is not something that was part of our conversation with our exchange.
Thanks for being here, Mr. Petty.
Yes, thank you.
I don't have anyone else signed up to speak in the public hearing, so I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and ask Lance to come back up and let us know about the Planning Commission's recommendations here.
The Planning Commission made a recommendation for approval by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you, sir. Councilors, discussion?
I have one more question. Lance, are there requirements for lighting, and how will that affect the single-family homes?
Let's see. That's a question I'm not really certain about. I don't think there are any lighting requirements, but I can definitely find out. I don't think there are.
I believe the last presentation about the parking lot further Walnut didn't have an inclusion of lighting in it.
Did it?
Oh, I'm sorry. It did not.
There was no lighting?
Correct. It did not.
Mayor, when the Walnut property was discussed, we had a larger conversation, I think, amongst council that night about parking and the fraternities and the need for on-campus parking and those different things. I know a lot of other stuff has happened since then for us to talk about, but has that conversation furthered at all?
No, not really. I think we're all in agreement that the continued expansion of parking into the residential areas around campus is a problem. I know the questions on Walnut were really a little different because it wasn't contiguous to existing parking or existing RMI, I don't think, except for maybe across the street. And really, from a zoning perspective, I'm not sure that the specifics of the parking lot are particularly relevant to the question. Given the contiguous nature of this, the fact that it's connected to existing parking lots, and the fact that there were no neighborhood objectors at either the Planning Commission or at this meeting, would indicate to me that the zoning request is not out of order. So, there would be, I assume, Lance, tell me are there requirements for permits or an appearance before council before a parking lot would be built in terms of design standards, or how does that?
Not before council, but there are permits that are required for the building of it, construction.
Mm-hmm. So from the standpoint of the zoning matter, I'm not sure that there's a whole lot that we're going to bring to the discussion from the actual design of the parking lot. Further discussion, councilors? Is there a motion on this item?
Motion to approve planning recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a couple of seconds to approve the Planning Commission's recommendation on this matter. Teresa, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington?
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti?
Yes.
Councilor Redlake?
Yes.
Councilor Jablonski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that request for rezoning is approved. That takes us to item 6B. Under public hearings, receive public comment regarding a request from Oklahoma Green Stop LLC, Dennis Adams, for a specific use permit to allow for a medical marijuana dispensary at 207 South Main Street. This is CC-20-141. Mr. Dorman, did we have good notice on this item?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gross.
Yes. This specific use permit would allow a medical marijuana dispensary located at 207 South Main Street. It's located on the southeast corner of Maple and Main. This is a bird's eye view or aerial view that shows the actual location. It's in a strip shopping center. And this is a street view looking from Main Street, and this is the location of the site. Are there any questions?
Counselors? At this point, I will open the public hearing. I think the applicant, Dennis Adams, is here. Maybe? The applicant is not here. That's unfortunate.
Yes.
Oh, there he
yes,
is.
I'm
There he is
here.
online. I forgot that you could be here online.
Yeah, I'm new to it too. So,
Go ahead, sir.
all right, my name is Dennis Adams. I'm the owner of Oklahoma Green Stop here at 207 South Main. Have 13 employees, also a member of Chamber of Commerce, licensed by OMMA, also by the OBN, and also got our food license also. So, and I'm open for any questions.
Counselors, any questions? We appreciate you being here online, sir. At this
Thank
time,
you
I have
all.
no one else signed up to speak, and so I'll close the public hearing and ask Dennis for, or it's not Dennis, I'll ask Lance for Planning Commission's recommendations.
The Planning Commission made a recommendation for approval by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you, Lance. Counselors, questions, comments, or a motion on this item?
Motion to accept planning commission recommendation and approve the specific use permit for the property located at 207 South Main Street.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the specific use permit. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Darlington,
No.
Councilor Zanotti,
Yes.
Councilor Whitley,
No.
Councilor Zawalski.
Yes.
With a vote of 3-2, with Vice Mayor Darlington and Councilor Wedlake voting no, that specific use permit will be approved. That takes us to item 7 on the agenda, general orders. First up, we have Christy Cluck with our fourth quarter financial report.
Good evening. Christy Cluck, Finance Director, and I'm here this evening to bring you the fourth quarter report for fiscal year 20. So the city's fiscal year ended on June 30th, and we are currently in the midst of closing the books on that fiscal year. So keep in mind that the fourth quarter report that's in your packet this evening, it is a preliminary report of this past fiscal year's financial activity, and that final entries of activity are ongoing as we speak. So the full and final audited financial report will be presented in December under the cover of the comprehensive annual financial report. So first I want to kind of look at the revenues and focus on the recorded activity as of June 30th. And the report in the packet does show that the general fund revenues in total are meeting projections for FY20. And that is despite a downturn that we saw in our sales tax during the months of May and June. As we look at the SUA funds revenue and the revenues of other city funds, we see in the report that those funds are showing that we're coming in under budget as of June 30th. However, I do want to point out that that is largely due to grant revenues and loan proceeds that were not received as of June 30th. And those revenues all relate to ongoing capital projects. And so we will realize those revenues in future fiscal years as we continue work on those capital projects and as we draw down those funds under the grant program and the loan program that they're funded through. So now looking at expenditures, I want to remind you that in the fourth quarter, staff did institute some spending reductions across all the departments. And this was just to hedge against the unknowns of the COVID-19 pandemic and what that might do to our city revenues. And so at that time, all non-essential spending was eliminated, and all of our essential spending requests were very carefully reviewed by both the finance department and the city manager's office. And so largely as a result of those actions, we have seen that our operating and maintenance expenditures have come in under budget. And that's pretty much across the board. We're looking at about a 12% under budget in the general fund, almost 20% under budget across all the SUA funds, and then about a 10% under budget in the other city funds.
And Chrissy,
So
just
these savings, oh, yes.
sorry, just to clarify, when you say those percentages under budget are percentage under the spending budgets, correct?
Under the spending budget for our operating and maintenance expenses. So not including any capital project.
Thank you.
That also does not include any transfers in and out between funds. So all of those savings that were realized in FY20, through those spending reductions, that will directly help to offset any future revenue shortfalls that we may still experience as this COVID-19 pandemic continues. And then I just want to lastly just kind of reaffirm that staff continues to be very cautious as we move into fiscal year 21, because we know that this pandemic is not behind us. And so those spending reductions that we implemented back in April, those are continuing into the new fiscal year and will continue until further notice. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have, or try to answer any questions at least.
Thank you, Christy. Councilors, questions?
Appreciate the hard work that you're doing under these circumstances.
Thank you.
I think it's noteworthy and something to be celebrated that the revenue numbers are better than we expected, and staff has done a fantastic job of keeping expenses well below where they needed to be to keep these things in balance. I think it's also important to note that when we cut spending at that level, 10, 20%, there are a number of projects and issues around the city that end up not getting done, and we're hopeful that those things will be put back in, and we're able to, if we continue to see decent revenues, that we'll be able to see some of those projects back up and running.
Yes, sir. One of the projects that Councilman inquired about today was the sod project down at Block 34. That's one that was put on hold. There is a list, and we have maintained that list, and should we be fortunate enough for our revenues to continue as they have the last couple of months, we'll plug those back in at a later date and bring those to council, because it will require a budget amendment. So yeah. You will know when that happens.
Do we have a sense of, I mean, I know April collections for April sales and collections for May sales were certainly down, given that many businesses were closed for at least a portion of that period. The expectations were that we would continue to see below budget collections, but we didn't. Do we have a sense at all on why things rebounded as quickly as they did? Is there a lesson we can learn from the fact that we were able to collect more than we expected?
There's been some speculation at the state level, even because other communities have experienced the same thing that we're experiencing, and so there's been some speculation that this represents our citizens spending local, and that maybe some of the leakage of spending outside of Stillwater has been stopped just with people not traveling as much.
Yeah.
Again, that's speculation.
I think a contributing factor also is the unemployment increase that we have seen, and the stimulus funds that were one time and have run out at this point. And if those don't continue, I think that'll give us a better idea of exactly what the effect has been.
Yeah, I think I was on a conference call with other mayors around the state a while back, and they had noticed that other smaller towns that do have a significant leakage to bigger towns in their area were seeing the same kind of bump that we had seen. And I think, while that's not scientifically proven at this point, I think it's at least a good indication that shopping local has a huge impact on city budgets, and the amount of money we lose to folks deciding to drive an hour to go do regular shopping. Those are things that you could have bought here in Stillwater. I certainly have been buying them here in Stillwater more, and it provides an incredible boost to local, our ability to provide for public safety, transportation projects, parks and recreation projects. So at this point, I'm certainly going to cheer on the fact that shopping local is going to be what gets us through as we continue to go forward. So certainly not out of the woods by any means, given where this coming fall might end up. But it's a good thing to see people spending money in Stillwater and keeping their tax dollars local.
Just to ask the question, is there any sense of how much of those sales tax dollars are spent from online sales? Since municipalities now have, or geographical areas now have the ability to collect that sales tax, are we seeing some of this mitigation of our revenue downturns because of online sales?
So the online sales are reported through our use tax instead of sales tax, and we are seeing a consistent uptick in our use tax collections each month, and they are most definitely offsetting some of the declines that we're seeing in sales tax.
Which, again, kind of echoes the importance of that. Certainly does not supersede the importance of shopping local. I don't mean to imply that by any means, but it does outline the importance of stopping that loss of revenue through online means. So,
Most
thanks,
definitely.
Christy.
Councilors, further questions for Christy? Appreciate the report. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
This time we'll move to 7B, approve submittal of an application to Firehouse Subs for a grant with no matching funds required in the amount of $45,620.64 for the purchase of 2 ATVs for the Stillwater Police Department. Chief Watts, good to see you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good to see you, Vice Mayor, councilors. Well, it seems like this is kind of a fitting time to jump in if we were talking about budget money. The police department, we're always looking for ways to better serve our citizens and save money. Doing so, Firehouse Subs has a program for first responders that they can apply for grant money to purchase equipment that they might not otherwise be able to purchase. And so we would like to make application to Firehouse Subs to purchase 2 utility vehicles that could be used at special events like walk-around, parades, the Mid-South, all of the races we have in town, our 1,200-acre lake that we have. These UTVs would be fully equipped to transport personnel into and out of congested areas. And so what we'd like to do is apply to Firehouse Subs for grant money to purchase 2 UTVs with no matching funds. So the cost to the city would be the upkeep and maintenance on those vehicles, which we could absorb out of our current funding for maintenance for our vehicles.
Excellent. Councilors, any questions for Chief Watts?
Does anybody on the council
Just have a question.
My only question.
Is this like a bus type of a piece of equipment, or is it like a, how many people can fit on it?
Well,
Does it transport people?
most of these have a folding seat system, so 4 to 6. It has a utility bed on it, so you could haul equipment, water, ice, medical supplies. It just depends on how you configure the seating on it, but 4 to 6 would be your normal transport numbers. Less if you're hauling more equipment, or you put we could use it to go into a real rugged area like our 1,200-acre lake if we have an injury on the bike trails there, and we could put emergency equipment on there to haul out one person. So it can be configured to meet a variety of needs.
Thank you. That helps me a lot.
We're certainly not in the habit of saying no to asking for free money from local businesses. So, councilors, is there no further? If there are other further comments, I'd love to hear a motion.
Motion to approve the submittal of application to Firehouse Subs for a grant with no matching funds required in the amount of $45,620.64 for the purchase of 2 ATVs for the Stillwater Police Department.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this item. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington?
Yes.
Counselor Zanotti,
Yes.
Counselor Redley,
Yes.
Counselor Zawadzki.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that request is approved. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mayor.
Item 7C is approve a budget amendment appropriating $10,000 from Fund 851 fund balance for landscape maintenance in the Business Improvement District Number 1. Melissa Reams? Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. There's a memorandum I have here requesting that be pulled from this agenda and moved to a future CETA agenda. So we will get that on I don't think we need a motion or anything on that. We'll see that on a future CETA agenda. All right. That takes us to item 7D, City Projects Update with Mr. McClenny.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. John McClenny, Special Projects. This will be a quarterly project update for every active project in the city that was underway April, May, and June, last quarter of last year, or of this year. This will be a very high-level brief overview due to the number of projects. There's over 30 underway right now, and as a reminder, a great deal of detail is available on the project pages on the city's website. You would go to the city's website and look for current projects. There's an interactive map that you can click on and see projects there. There's a master list of all the projects that are currently on the budget. And then there's quarterly financial updates on all the projects as well. When we talk about active projects, the ones that are in this report are projects where construction is underway during the time frame, equipment has been purchased, design is in progress, or the project was completed in April, May, and June of 2020. First project is advanced meter infrastructure. It's a system of two-way communication in its simplest form between customer service at City Hall and our customers' meters, both water and electric. That's budgeted at $8.9 million, and that pilot project is currently underway. We expect to be completed with the pilot project sometime towards the end of August, and we'll start testing. Next is the fire department's ladder truck. The current unit's aged past its 20-year service life. It's budgeted at $992,000, and the equipment is on order. Next is meter division trucks. The failure of field meter transmitters increased the need for vehicles. Those transmitters were under warranty, so the vendor has funded the vehicle purchase. And as of this report, the trucks have been purchased and they are in use. Strickland Park Playground Phase 1 is replacement of playground equipment at Strickland Park that had aged out of its useful life and no longer met necessary requirements. It's budgeted at $212,000. 50% of that is CDBG funds, and it is currently 75% complete. McElroy, Lewis, and Redbud Sewer, that is to replace a sewer line. It is budgeted at $1.7 million, and it is 60% complete. Wastewater treatment plant improvements are improvements to multiple facilities at the wastewater treatment plant. There's a list here. Budget is $3.1 million. It is 80% complete. West College Eiler Sewer and Manhole Rehabilitation. That's to replace sewer lines and rehabilitate manholes in this area. It's a design project at this point, $315,000 budgeted for design, and the project design is currently underway. Western Sewer Interceptors. This is to evaluate eliminating up to 8 sewer lift stations. It's also a design project, $260,000 budgeted, and that design is also underway. Fourth and Hester Water and Sewer Lines. This is to relocate water and sewer lines for a pavement project. It's budgeted at $114,000. That bid opening was completed July 22nd of 2020.
When will we see those bids on the sewer?
I will have a very limited ability to answer questions, but I have people here who can help with that. So,
You've already awarded the project.
Okay. was going to say, I thought we had seen that. Okay.
The South Sanitary Sewer Interceptor. This is to replace a sewer interceptor. It's also a design project, $333,000, and the preliminary design on this is complete. The hospital area water line replacement phase 2. This replaces approximately 8,000 feet of aging water line. It's budgeted at $1.8 million. This project was completed in the last quarter. North Perkins Road project. This is a joint project with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. Budget for the city is $3.4 million, and the budget for ODOT is $13.4 million. Utility relocation is currently underway, and the right-of-way has been 95% secured. McElroy.
Do I get credit for federal grant on that?
We're always telling you you're spending money and you're not bringing it in money, so we'll give you credit for giving us grants on that one.
McElroy and Boomer Road water line replacement. This is actually part of a larger transportation project. It's $145,000 to replace these water lines, and the project is 95% complete. Water treatment plant upgrades. This is to upgrade and improve various processes at the water treatment plant, listed here. Budget is $5.6 million. Construction and testing is currently underway. 32nd Avenue Booster Pump Station and Water Line. This will construct a new booster pump station and install 3 miles of water line. It's budgeted at $8.1 million. They're completing the water line testing and disinfection and the electrical at the booster pump station. 26th Avenue culvert replacement. The culvert was damaged due to flooding. That was budgeted at $588,000, and the project is complete. Pavement management encompasses several projects in several years. Basically, it's a systematic maintenance process. There's numerous locations all over town, and there are various maintenance strategies. So fiscal year 18 was budgeted at $4.7 million. It's currently 70% complete. The rest is under construction. Fiscal year 19 is budgeted at $1.87 million, 67% complete. And fiscal year 20 is budgeted at $4.6 million. The projects have been selected and authorized. I believe that came up at the last council meeting. Airport arterial improvement. This is the improvement and widening of the airport access road. It is budgeted at $4.3 million. Design is currently in progress. Stormwater master plan is a master plan to address a variety of stormwater issues and provide guidance for future projects and fundings. Budgeted at $703,000. Consultant's been hired and the work is currently underway. It's about 35% complete. Substation transformer replacement. This replaces transformers at 4 different substations throughout Stillwater. Budgeted at $7.3 million, and this project is complete. Airport apron reconstruction is to replace the asphalt apron at the airport with concrete. There are 2 sections, $5.8 million budget for the north section, $6.4 million budget for the south section, and both of these are currently under construction. Parallel taxiway constructs a parallel taxiway for the main runway, budgeted at $4.98 million, and this project is complete. To rehab runway 04/22 is to rehabilitate the secondary runway, and it is budgeted at $3.95 million and is currently under construction. Aircraft rescue firefighting apparatus. The current truck is well past its service life. It is budgeted at $790,000 and the equipment is on order. Fuel farm upgrade at the airport. This is to upgrade the airport's entire fueling system. It is budgeted at $300,000 and the contract has been awarded. So we get to the questions part, and I'll say again that I have people here who can help answer these. My ability to answer them will be limited, although there are a couple of projects I know a little more about. We can also schedule some special presentations as needed for any of these projects if you want to go into more detail. And as far as the next quarterly report, we hope to add pictures as we continue to try to improve these. So I will open it up for questions.
Councilors, any questions?
I don't have any questions. I think it's just a gentle reminder of how many things are going on within the city that we tend to, we sit and approve or talk about in a meeting, but to hear that there's over 30 projects is amazing. And I guess one suggestion I would have is maybe if we could, I would love to see pictures and have a little more detail. So maybe we could group them by transportation, just so that it's not all of them at one time, because that's a lot to talk about. But it is nice to see things happening. And know that those projects are occurring, despite what seems to be getting most of the attention right now. The city is still doing what it needs to be doing as far as moving forward and keeping up. So thank you.
I also am amazed at the number of things that are going on. I think, John, it would be helpful. Pictures would be lovely. And I would also like start dates and anticipated, I know that things always change, but anticipated finish dates. It just gives, it's kind of wide open without dates. I also have a question about the North Perkins Road. The city's responsible for the utilities. Are those utilities going to be relocated underground?
Monty's on his way.
Some of the utilities will be relocated underground. Some of Stillwater's electric utilities will be cleared out of the intersection of McElroy and Perkins and rerouted, and some of those put underground. The big overhead, large voltage lines will stay. OG&E has to relocate one pole. They're at the northwest corner, and then a couple of guy poles back to the east, and then all the other utilities are already underground.
Monty, before you take off, do you have a sense of when that construction will start, when we'll start to see?
So I checked with ODOT's division engineer last week. He said it's still in the federal fiscal year 21, so sometime after October, and possibly later this year, but maybe more likely in the first quarter next year.
Okay. Any further questions about projects? Thank you, John. I think it's as a couple of the counselors said, a good thing to start getting these quarterly updates and those suggestions around a little more detail would be great. And if you want to break them up into different meetings, we could maybe focus on them a little bit tighter, but it's helpful.
We'll work on that.
Thank you. All right. That takes us to item 7E, which is our COVID-19 update section. I suppose there's lots of different things we could talk about under this heading right now. We do have the ordinance around parking space rentals that we'll talk about in a minute on the agenda, next item. In terms of general COVID-19 updates, I think we've all seen current data. We're not seeing a pronounced uptick quite yet, although that's something we've talked about being somewhat expected in return to university students coming to town. I think the latest numbers I saw out of the first 4,000 tests they had done on campus, they were still in the 0.7% positive range, which is great, less than 1% positivity of all of the on-campus students that they've tested. That does bring up the question around local sorority house that reported tests independently that are evidently not included in the state numbers because the State Department of Health does not recognize the antigen test that they used. Even with those tests, we're still at a pretty low percentage, I think still in the 1% range or below 1% in terms of all the tests that have been done. I've asked around about why the state doesn't count those antigen tests, and I haven't gotten a clear answer on that quite yet. I'm also making sure and checking with the university on whether there are other houses or other places that might have used those tests, and make sure that we're getting good numbers. I would say that in speaking to the Payne County Health Department, every person that's tested positive, whether it's through an antigen test or not, is tracked in their contact tracing program. The university treats them just the same as any other positive test that they would get through the university's program. And so, there's no danger that any of those folks are slipping through the cracks in terms of contact tracing or the mitigation that the university has in its plan. But they are not currently being reported in the state's official numbers. Now, the other question I've gotten quite a bit about that is how it affects the school district, because the school district uses the state's official reporting numbers in its decision making. They are aware of the fact that those test positives are not in the numbers at this point, and they will use their decision making procedures as warranted. I would just take this opportunity, I think, to remind folks out there that the city and the school district are separate entities. We both have separate elected school or elected boards. The city council and the school board are elected separately and operate independently. The same with Meridian Technology Center, which has its own elected school board. And of course, the university is a state agency, an independent state agency. And so we have coordination among those groups, but we don't make each other's decisions. The school district makes its decisions, the university makes its. We decide things for the city, and we're trying to communicate. We're communicating very well, I think, and we have for the last several months of this pandemic, but we do not have an overarching direction from the state. I think that's one of the real concerns, and one of the things, honestly, that's been lacking in all of this over the last several months is the lack of clear direction from a coordinating body at the state level to help all of those independent agencies figure out how to move forward in the most efficient, effective way. So that being said, we did have issues that have been spoken about in public comments earlier today with perception of what's going on Washington Street with our local bars and students coming back into town. We've talked about this before, but local bar owners, including several of the folks that were here earlier tonight, did reach out to the city. We sat down and had a meeting with those folks and our county health department a couple of weeks back to talk about the measures that they were taking. I think we all would prefer that businesses and individuals are able to make good decisions without having to be told what to do. And I appreciated the fact that those bar owners did reach out and talk to us about the mitigation procedures they were taking. I think it is, as was pointed out in one of the comments, there are several bars that have self-limited their occupancy rates, and they're not letting in their full crowds. That has contributed to some of the lines outside. There are still bars that haven't opened by their own choice. So, it's a difficult situation. I know videos of parties happening are not what any of us want to see. I think personally fairly disappointed in the decision-making process by some of the folks who have decided that it's a good time to be out in a crowded space like that. And we would certainly, I would urge folks to please reconsider putting themselves in that situation. In terms of what needs to happen around bar regulation and whether there needs to be more done there, I certainly have received several comments since Sunday morning asking us to completely close the bars down. Everything from just close the bars down to close everything down to go back to April's shelter-in-place style of regulation. There's a lot of different opinions from a lot of different people in our community, and I certainly understand the concern there. Those in the past have all been done by by emergency order, and that is certainly the most responsive way to deal with some of these issues. I think in speaking with some of the bar owners and speaking with some of the other folks around town, there are some steps that we can take that might, I think, help to mitigate some of the issues that we're seeing. Like I said, I think most of them are limiting their occupancy, but I am looking at, through emergency order, requiring additional limited occupancy at bars, especially in town. We're also looking at, we've done an extended survey of other college towns in the Big 12 Conference and other college towns around the country to see what measures they've taken. One of the ones we see in most of those is the requirement of table service, that standing room would not be allowed, and that parties need to be seated at a table in order to receive service at a bar. That certainly seems like an effective and the type of measure that would help keep people distanced while they're in the bar, which is one of the issues that we've seen and we've heard from bar owners is a problem. No matter how many folks they're in the bar, if you put 10 of them in there, they're all going to stand next to each other. If you put 50 of them in there, they're all going to stand next to each other. And so one way to help make sure that doesn't happen is to require table service. That would be done through an emergency order, which we're currently working on and will likely go into place here in the next day or so in time for this weekend's heavy bar activity. That's kind of, at this point, what I think will help us mitigate some of the issues we're seeing. There's nothing more important to the city of Stillwater than the health and safety of our residents. There's nothing, I think, more important to the city of Stillwater's economic overall health than having students here and on campus and attending classes. Football games have gotten a lot of press. We're certainly, interested to see what happens there. But if students aren't on campus, that's a tremendous detriment to the community and certainly the community's economy. So taking measures like this to try to ensure the spread of COVID-19 stays manageable is going to be necessary to make sure we're able to continue seeing those folks here on campus. As I said before, the school district's opening and in-person administration or in-person education is also reliant on these infection rates. Right? They're not tied just to the kids or to the teachers. They're tied to the community infection rates. And so minimizing the spread of COVID-19 in the community is essential for making sure our children are able to, if they so choose, if those families so choose, to partake in in-person instruction. So it's an important issue and one that we will continue to monitor and to take action as needed. Councilors, any questions, comments, thoughts about COVID-19?
So
Mayor, go ahead, John.
No, go ahead. Wayne.
I just wanted to point out, it certainly was concerning to see those videos and hear the news about the sorority house. But I also want to flip the point a little bit and recognize that Oklahoma State University and the Stillwater community, we saw a glimpse of a small population of the students that come, the college students that are in our community. We have a larger group, 20,000, and there are students that are following the ordinance. They are wearing their masks. They are supportive of this situation. And there are bar owners and there are businesses that are doing the same thing. And so I want to take this time and focus on and congratulating them and saying thank you. It does make a difference. Every person who follows this makes a difference in the same sense that a person who doesn't makes a difference. And so I want to also do a shout out because there are many students that are doing it. And unfortunately, we don't see those videos as much, if at all. And we don't commend those entities that are following the ordinance and making a difference. And so I wanted to make sure that I included that. Thank you, because that does make a difference and it is important. And I want them to hear that and recognize that we're not just going to shed the light on those that aren't following it. We want to commend those that are doing it because they are making a difference.
Good point.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, Councilor Zanotti, about the concept of confirmation bias and seeing those clips. I think there was 2 clips I saw over the weekend, and how that represents a very small minority of the student body as a whole. I would further those comments by saying that probably the people that have the most power in this decision going forward about further regulations and bar closures, some of you are sitting in the audience right now. Ensuring that your patrons are are maintaining social distancing, that are following the rules, that are wearing masks, all of that stuff that a lot of you are doing now. The unfortunate reality is that it only takes a small group to destroy that for a lot of people. I can tell you that me personally, I'm not a big fan of any government entity regulating anybody's private business. As a private business owner myself, that is not something that I would advocate. The 50,000-foot view of that, however, is that we as the council, sitting up here on the horseshoe, sitting at home, we have to take the health and well-being of our citizenry as a whole. So, I would implore you all, as business owners of these establishments, to continue doing what you're doing as far as your diligence in mitigating the spread of COVID-19. Ultimately, you guys have the most power in that respect. One question I had with regards to reporting. So these cases at OSU and positive numbers we've seen, these are not numbers that we will see in the officially reported Payne County Health Department numbers. Is that correct?
Just the one sorority that had the 23 or whatever it was cases. Those were of a particular test that are not recognized. All of the other rest of the testing at the university is reflected.
Part of that.
Yes.
Are part of that cohort. Okay. So yeah, I think it's important.
I just had a follow-up to that, John.
Yeah.
Is it that the university students,
You're breaking up a little on us, Counselor. It's our first real Zoom.
Mayor,
glitch.
do you have an answer for that?
I don't. I'm not sure what the question was. I'm not sure if she's still with us or not.
would be reportable, but is it possible because they're university students with?
Oh, now she's gone. Well, when she comes back, we'll get that question answered.
Yeah.
What else were you going to say, Councilor?
Well, and my question may actually be along the same lines as Councilor Jalowski's. So with with those numbers that we're seeing from OSU, all of those are counted except for this particular instance of the sorority because of that specific test.
Yes.
So I think that's an important distinction to make here, because I've gotten a lot of emails about people quite irate about the fact that nobody's counting OSU numbers, and that actually is not true. That is not the case. This is an extenuating circumstance with this particular test, but with the official testing that OSU has done as part of their return to campus program, those numbers are included in the Payne County Health Department numbers as a whole. Correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I want to clear that up, and that anybody that thinks that OSU numbers are not being counted in this, in fact they are, minus this extenuating circumstance with the sorority. So
I would just add that there are other people who have used this antigen test, and it's not counted at all by the state.
Yeah.
So the state has decided, I think I don't know, I saw something, 30 states that do use it and 20 states that don't, or I don't know. But Oklahoma is one of the states that does not count the test results from that specific type of tests in its numbers. Mm-hmm. So this sorority grouping is part of those. There may be others out there. Mm-hmm. I would also just reiterate that if it is reported as a positive test, even if it was an antigen test, the OSU, they're still doing contact tracing and handling those cases the same way. Same with the Payne County Health Department. Anytime they're notified of a positive case, regardless of what type of test it was, they are performing all of the same contact tracing, quarantine rules, isolation rules.
And I'll try to head off any further questions regarding why the state does not accept the rapid antigen or quick antigen test. I certainly don't know. Does anybody know? Nobody has a good answer for that. So we don't know why that is. But suffice it to say that the state does not recognize the quick antigen test as a valid positivity marker. So,
Councilor
Do you
Jalowski,
want to hear the answer from the FDA?
Yes.
One of the main advantages of an antigen test is the speed of the test, which can provide results in minutes. However, antigen tests may not detect all active infections, as they do not work the same way as a PCR. They're very specific for the virus, but they're not as sensitive as the molecular PCR test. This means that positive results from antigen tests are highly accurate, but there's a higher chance of false negatives.
Which is interesting because you have a high false negativity rate, which means that you should technically take the positive tests at their face value. So again, that doesn't make any sense, and I'm not sure that I've ever gotten a straight answer as to why the state of Oklahoma does not recognize those as a valid test. And maybe there is somebody out there with the answer, but I can't think of why. Because in that respect, you would be weary of a negative test as a positive false negative, but it's such a sensitive test. It's not very specific, it's very specific, but it's not very sensitive. So again, it's one of those things that kind of boggles my mind. Anyway,
add it to the list.
Yeah.
Councilor Jaloski, did you have a question?
Can you hear me unbroken
Yes, we can.
now? Oh, wonderful. So I do think that this issue around data and data reporting, it's something that I certainly got tapped a lot this weekend about kind of what the parameters are with some of our community partners and how that works. And I do think I don't know if it's transparency as much as it is just kind of shedding some light on some of those boundaries and kind of what that looks like. And some of that I think is this discussion with the antigen test. I know that was new information for me this weekend. I didn't realize that those tests were not reported. But the other thing that I think is maybe a challenge for us as a university community is that some of our students, as they're tested, they have both a temporary address and a permanent address, and where their cases are recorded may depend on what address they're given or kind of linked to. I don't know if insurance and things like that. So one of the questions, and maybe it's a question for OSU or a question to be answered by OSU at another time for us, for me, and that I was asked quite a bit this weekend was, if their tests are reported in the state numbers, if they have a permanent address that's listed differently, and if not, how are we? Is the county level health department still, they're working those cases, but we won't see them in the numbers. I think that caused a lot of confusion this weekend when we saw small numbers coming out of the state for our county, but we had a recognition of, much larger numbers from, the sorority, and then even just the 22 that OSU acknowledged from their testing.
I do think that those 22 that the OSU had acknowledged previously were in the state numbers, or would be eventually, right? It still sometimes can take a couple days for them to show up in the state numbers, even though they're reported the same way. I think my understanding is all of the on-campus testing that OSU is doing, and OSU is testing every on-campus resident, all of their residence hall residents, and they're testing all of the Greek housing residents. All of those folks are being reported as residents in Stillwater. So if they test positive, they're showing up as local residents. Now, if you're a student off campus and you go get a test and you tell the health department your address is in Texas because that's where your parents live, they will get notified of the positive result, and they will track you and they will put you in contact tracing, but your number will be reported in your county that you reported living in. And then they will check on you and they will say, oh, well, you're actually in Stillwater and you're being, tracked under the local Payne County Health Department. And so they'll move the number. So it will come back to us eventually. So it's a question of delay, I think, most of all in those kinds of cases when it's a local resident who gives a different address as part of their testing procedure. It is a concern in the delay and the amount of time it takes us to know exactly where those people are. But Payne County Health has been adamant about the fact that if they're a local resident and they test positive, regardless of what they put in as their home address, that they are being folded into the contact tracing and the mitigation procedures of Payne County Health Department. So all that to say, we're handling it well, I think, but our numbers from day to day are, who knows? I think it's very difficult to say, oh, we only had 6 cases today or whatever the number was today, and feel very confident that that's a true reflection of current active cases of COVID-19 in our community.
Yeah, just so tough when we're making, we have so many families that are hanging on those numbers, week to week for school decisions and things like that. It's consequential. It's just hard to kind of think about how you gather it all into one place in a timely manner. But I think just understanding, kind of just hearing that said out loud, hopefully answers some of our community questions about where are they going to show up or where are they not going to show up, and just kind of that big discussion about our conversations with the community.
Agreed. And I think that goes back to the concerns that I have about the lack of a coordinated effort at the state level to give all of us the same information, the same data, to make sure everybody's on the same page about exactly what it is we're seeing in the data that we're getting. Because I think, every time I talk to somebody from the university or I talk to somebody from the school board, they have a different insight into, I got most of the information I have about the antigen testing from people at those other, entities in the city, right? That's not coming down to us from anywhere else. And so we have to go find that information. It's not being presented in a way that makes, that gives us a clear picture from the beginning. And so when something like this pops up and we all go, oh, wait, the antigen tests aren't being counted, we all have to chase it down on our own, which is very frustrating. Other comments, questions, concerns from the counselors?
Mayor, I'm just curious on this antigen test. Are the athletes being tested with the antigen test, or are they doing the PCR?
My understanding is that everything that OSU is administering directly is PCR. The Greek houses had the option of being tested because they're not technically not parts of OSU. They're independent. They, I think, had the option of going and getting other types of tests and may have chosen to take the fastest one they could find. But everything that OSU is administering on campus is a PCR test.
Okay.
I don't know that includes OSU athletics, however.
Again. No,
that's something we may need to
coordinated
confirm, because I certainly don't want to spread misinformation, but I think athletics is excluded from that.
Well, it's a good question. We should ask somebody.
Yeah. Mayor, I really appreciated your comment about clarifying what the city actually can and cannot do. That we are only responsible for what is within the city lines, which one other entity that we do not have control over is the county. All of the questions about weed stock and why didn't we do something about that it's out of our purview. And
that is an issue that's still being addressed.
Wonder, yes.
There's still work being done to see if there's anything that can be done about weed stock this weekend. There's still discussions that are ongoing because I think every entity in the community that cares about the health and safety of our community, and certainly the ones that are making decisions about school based on the health and safety of our community, are concerned about that event. And so we've had conversations today about whether there's options for the county, the city, the county health department, the state, for somebody to be able to take some kind of action. So it's not dead in terms of how we're trying to address it, but it is. I mean, the entities like that in the county certainly are not subject to anywhere near the kind of review that we would have if it was a city inside the city limits.
I also have, along that line, thinking about, and maybe you don't want to discuss this tonight, but what can the city do in the city about people, since tailgating is not permitted on campus, it'll be perhaps located in other areas, private lots or parking lots. Do we have any possibility of managing that for the city?
We certainly do. I mean, in the sense that we've had executive or emergency declarations in the past that have limited the size of gatherings and that sort of thing. So there are tools that we can use. it's there's going to be a lot of questions between now and then. I think it's still not a settled issue that there will be football games played. They're still proceeding in that direction, but that changes, I think, minute to minute. I did reach out and speak to some folks at the athletic department to make sure that we're coordinating on what their plans are and exactly how they see it. I know they did discuss that in part of when they discussed tailgating is what happens when they just go across the street. And so, as we get closer to the potential of games being played in Stillwater, we will certainly address that, because I think you're right. There's a concern. There are lots close to campus in town where you could put a couple thousand people pretty easily. And that would, again, I think, be as concerning as something like Weedstock is. And so, being in the city limits, we have the ability to put some rules in place that would help us address those kinds of things. And it has been a topic of discussion already, and will continue to be as we get closer.
Thank you. And one other item on private property questions that I've had this weekend. Parties in neighborhoods that are clearly, streets lined with cars and large gatherings of people. What could citizens do if that happens in their neighborhood?
Well, if I may, Mayor, is one of the issues that surrounds this whole discussion about parties and bars and that kind of thing. I think that some of my friends in the bar business may be amazed to hear me say this, but shutting them down could be one of the worst things that we could do, because it would certainly drive those that want to party into private property, and we lose all control in some cases. Vice Mayor, the proper thing for a person to do that's concerned about that is to call the police and report the noise, report the parking incidents, and we have dealt with those party situations for years, and we know how to handle those. So if they just dial 372-4171 and report the address and what's going on, the police know how to handle it. The other thing that I would like to point out is that this is a national issue. From Notre Dame to Florida to Georgia to any state where the bars aren't just shut down and everybody's in lockdown, and even those where the bars are shut down, the parties are going to happen, and having them in some private settings can be pretty frustrating for the police as well, because of access and Fourth Amendment rights. So that's one thing that the people that are crying out for the bars to be shut down need to understand, is that they will find a way. And I'm not trying to be overly broad-brushed with my comments on that age group. I was a OSU freshman here at one point, and can actually remember those days still. And it's been going on since 1970 that I'm aware of. So,
I mean, we do have to take that into account. I think a big part of this, and a big, I think, message. I think President Hargis at the university put a message out this afternoon along these same lines. At the end of the day, people have to make good decisions. They have to recognize the danger of the situation that we're in. This is a novel virus. We still do not have a good understanding of how it affects people in the long term. We're seeing more evidence of younger people being affected in serious ways. It is not something you should just ignore and treat like it's not going to hurt you and you're not going to be bothered by it. Whether you get sick or not, you can also pass it to others. It can spread throughout our community. The spread of it, again, has a huge bearing on whether university and public school classes are able to happen. It is a tremendously impactful issue, and every person's choice about how they behave has a tremendous impact on the rest of our community. I think Councilor Zanotti's comments about the fact that for the most part, we're seeing good compliance. We've seen great compliance with our mask mandate since it went into effect in July. We've seen, I think, the bar owners in town, for by and large, have done, taken steps to try to mitigate these things. We've seen people making an effort, and that's absolutely commendable. But it only takes a small group of people doing the wrong thing and making poor choices to have a tremendous impact on the rest of our community. And that, I think, is what's so frustrating when you see these large groups of people, when you see people making the decision to go out and gather in groups without a mask on, is that it is clearly either just a refusal to understand how big of an impact that can make, or just plain ignorance about what the situation is. I know the university is trying to educate. We've been trying to educate. People have to make good choices. We're going to take the measures we can take. We're going to do the things we can do to try to mitigate the effects of those decisions. But if people choose to be dumb, and if people choose to put their health and the health of their community at risk, they're going to have a negative impact. And if you are one of those people, if you're trying to decide if it should matter to you or not, it should absolutely matter to you. You need to make better decisions because it affects a lot of people. It's not just you, it's not just your health, it's not just your friends, it's everybody in this town that is affected by what the decisions that you choose to make. And so we are asking you, please, for the benefit of everybody that lives here, take the precautions that we have recommended that you take. Wear a mask when you're out around other people. Avoid crowded situations where you cannot keep socially distanced. Keep your hands clean. Do all of the things that we've been talking about in this country for months now, because it matters to a lot of people. It matters to my 4 kids who are supposed to start school on Thursday, and they want to see their teachers. It matters to every single one of those high school football players that wants to play football this fall. It matters to every one of those OSU athletes that wants to play. It matters to the professors in the classrooms who don't want to get sick because a couple thousand of you were out partying somewhere where you shouldn't have been. Please, please make decisions that recognize the importance of your actions on the community at large. Please. And if you don't, we will take more stringent action. We're trying not to get into a situation where we have to go back to the kind of measures we've used in the past. But if people don't make better decisions, we don't have a choice. That's all I have to say. Anything further, councilors, on this item? We'll move on to ordinances. Item 8. On first read, we have ordinance 3456, an ordinance amending the Stillwater City Code by amending Chapter 23, Land Development Code, Article 13, Overlay Districts, Division 2, Special Purpose Overlay District, to amend Section 23-270, Requirements, Section 23-273, Development Standards, and Section 23-274, Duration of Designation and declaring an emergency. This is the ordinance that we've been working on to try to provide bars and restaurants and different types of businesses the ability to expand a little bit into the outdoors so that we can better physically distance folks who want to work on these establishments. John, do you want to say anything about the overall ordinance structure?
I think it's pretty straightforward the way that it's set up. It is placed in the overlay section of our zoning code as an overlay type district, and there are some limitations on where this actual use could go. It's fairly similar to what some other cities our size have done, college cities in that regard. Fayetteville and Lawrence, Kansas have both adopted something somewhat similar to this. Manhattan, Kansas, and Norman have committees that are looking at something along these lines right now, but as you mentioned, it's kind of designed to help deal with the whole issue of social distancing and trying to help out our restaurants and our bars a little bit. I will tell you that I've had conversations with the ABLE Commission as to our ability to license with this, and we may have to make some adjustments with regard to the removal of the sidewalk in some instances. If the sidewalk is removed from the parking area, we would not be able to license that area or full licensing anyways. it would require that we would add the sidewalk back in, which means we would basically reroute the sidewalk around the area. We've figured out a way to do that. The other thing that Abel has advised me is that there are some relaxed rules in place right now with regard to carryout and delivery services. And as long as the only thing that's being served there is beer or wine, that they would actually not have to license those premises because it could be delivered to that location and then consumed there, provided that it's consistent with the public consumption laws that the city has on its ordinance books. So we would need to make some adjustments there. But clearly this would make it possible to create some, temporary locations to do this, or longer term, depending on how the council feels about this type of ordinance. The other thing I would tell you is an ordinance is not the only way that you have to do this. You could also consider, I would tell you that Fort Collins, Colorado and Boulder, Colorado actually used emergency orders to make that area available. And if you chose to go that route instead of an ordinance, and then allowing the ordinance maybe some more time to address the issues of making it available to businesses other than restaurants and bars, and creating design standards, that you did have that option available as well. So there's not one way to do this. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Councilors, well, I'll just say something quickly. I think the idea of rolling some of this into an emergency order would make sense, especially if our next emergency order does require bars to have people seated at tables in order to serve them. Mm-hmm. If we then also included the ability to serve outside under something along these lines, that would allow them to, if they can't fit as many people inside with those rules, they may be able to move some of those folks outside so that they're still able to accommodate patrons, but in a more distanced and partially outside sort of scenario. So that would make some sense. It would also give us a little time to kind of see how it goes and
right.
see how many places are actually interested in doing something like this. And we could take what we learned from that and roll it into what an ordinance would look like from a long-term standpoint. So that makes some sense. Councilors, any other comments or questions about this?
Just a procedural question. Is there anything in the city charter that dictates how long an emergency order can be in effect?
No.
So you could conceivably do an emergency order for an indefinite period of time?
Well, obviously the emergency that was the basis for its issuance would have to still be in effect.
Sure.
And as long as we are having problems with COVID, this thing could remain in effect, as opposed to, normally there'll be I think every order we've done, we've actually had a termination date on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we did this in the context of an emergency order, I would anticipate that it would be a standalone order that would have a fairly lengthy date, possibly something going towards the end of the year, unless under other orders were rescinded or something along those lines. We can address that question.
Just for clarification, I'm not advocating that we do that. I would like to see an ordinance at some point in place, but agreed, in the interest of time and expedience, emergency order would be fine. But I do think that this is something that we're going to obviously be dealing with for a long time. So an ordinance in the long term makes sense. Sure. If an emergency order gives us some time and clarity to come up with a good ordinance, so be it. But.
I agree with the idea of using the emergency order to address the immediate issue. I love the idea of the parklets and the public street use. I would love to see it approached a little bit more from the design and development of it, rather than just strictly from an ordinance, and let the ordinance come out of what business owners, what bar owners would like to see. I particularly agree with some of the comments that we heard earlier, that it should not be just specific streets, but it should be situational streets that have parking to begin with, and speed limit, you know, as it's written, you know, everything is west of Main Street. It's like, there's also east of Main Street and McCampus Corner. So I would love to see this approach from a stakeholder development approach and the ordinance coming out of that rather than the ordinance driving this. And I love the idea of the emergency order.
Ditto.
I also really, from an urban planning perspective, even on a normal day, if we have those ever again, I love this idea. I like the idea of extending this concept past just our COVID response. But in the context of COVID, I really appreciate the opportunity to extend additional mitigative strategies to our business owners. I mean, they're taking the brunt of this for our community, and it's hard, I can't imagine. And it's great to have an idea or concept to extend to them that hopefully allows them to stay open more safely and to expand their business that they're able to provide to our citizens and to our community. I do have a concern about the Strip, about Washington Street. I'm trying hard. I think, Mayor, your discussion about possible emergency declarations coming forward maybe helps my concern a little bit, but after looking at the pedestrian traffic on Washington Street, I'm concerned about how we manage density and volume of folks if you've got additional seating outside and then your the pedestrian flow, kind of what that looks like if it's going to accomplish what I think we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And one of the things that has been discussed as part of this is, you know, if there were multiple instances where, say, a bar or establishment on Washington wanted to you know, rent out or lease the parking, some of the parking space in front, that we might look at restricting vehicular traffic on Washington during those times, so that you didn't have you know, auto pedestrian problems. That I think it would really depend on what those establishments wanted to do and how many people, you know, were looking to lease spaces, or, you know, how many of them were going to extend out in this way, and whether they were going to do it out in the parking area along the street, or whether they were going to use another, you know, venue to do it. And so I think we'd have to address it a little bit on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the business owners along Washington Street wanted to do with this kind of an ordinance. We've talked for a while about the idea of you know, Washington Street being pedestrian only on, you know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights from 8 to 2 or whatever it is. You know, I think you see that in other places. 6th Street in Austin is probably the best example. And I think that's, you know, there's discussion there. There's certainly concern about policing that area and the additional resources that might take. So, you know, there's a lot here. I think that kind of goes to what we were discussing, trying to figure out exactly what this would look like, and you know, holding a final ordinance until we have a little clearer picture of how it will work. But we would certainly want to take all that into account. Washington Street is can be a problematic place to drive and walk down at midnight on a Friday. So we would want to take all that into account.
Yeah, I think I also have additional concerns, you know, if there's limitations in capacity to get inside, and that's why we're seeing some of the lines standing outside, kind of creating that density of people, and then you have additional density in these parking spaces. I just wonder, are we going to end up even with just a bigger crowd than we're trying, right? We're trying to kind of crowd out. I wonder if we'll end up with a more condensed crowd in that space. I don't know. There's got to be a way to rein that out in a way that doesn't create that situation. I don't know, but
we could just make half the bars move off of the Strip.
I'm so sensitive to their situation. I just think it's so complicated and hard, and I hate that their businesses are being impacted the way that they're being impacted. I don't know how to fix it. I hope that we can come up with something that helps, but I just want to make sure that in that particular instance, because it is so unique, you know, as compared to a main street where parklets really could increase traffic flow in a really positive way, but not in an overwhelming way from pedestrians and things. I think we could have the opposite effect on Washington Street.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Going just a little bit, another point on the parklets not related to the emergency order, if you decide to do the emergency order. I think that taking advantage of the Main Street opportunity with method and the grants, we should move as quickly as we can on this planning. I'd love to see a time frame that would be realistic. As we know that every city in the country, I think, is doing this. And so we don't have to reinvent a whole program. It should be fairly straightforward to look at the top 3 and pick what we want and get it in motion, rather than waiting until, you know, who knows when to get this underway. So I'd really like to see some definition of dates from staff as to how they could move on this. And I think the Chamber Intergovernment Committee would be a big help in finding resources.
Yeah, I think we could read this. You know, we could move this off of first read and then try to start incorporating some of those suggested changes, which certainly makes sense, and you know, sort of see where we are by our next meeting and have a better sense of what the timeline could be.
Thank you.
No, as we've talked about many times, we don't have to have a final ordinance to move it to second read. There's certainly some changes that we'd want to see here. If there's not other specific comments here, I would entertain a motion on the ordinance at this point, and we can move forward with some of those suggested changes.
Do you want a motion to move this to second reading?
If you'd like to see it advanced, yeah, that would be the.
And it would, then we would change the locations, change the lease, perhaps, make it as has been suggested.
Yeah, I think we'd see those. We'd ask staff to go ahead and get some of those changes put in there.
Okay.
And if there was any further amendments that needed to be made, we could always hold the approval at the second reading, right?
Yep.
Sure. We just get through the first hurdle here.
You actually have a formal public hearing set for next week, and then you know, we could make some of the adjustments now, and then you hold your public hearing, and then after that public hearing, we can make some more adjustments, and then when you're ready to bring it back and second read it, then we can schedule it and be ready to go.
Yeah, that makes more sense. We've got a public hearing scheduled for our meeting next week.
Okay.
We can just hold it till then. Do we need a motion to table it till then, or can we?
You don't have to do anything at this
just have
point.
to not do anything with it, and then we could have the public hearing, see some of those changes made. In the meantime, first read it next week, and then see where we are in terms of having something finalized. Any objections to leaving this where it is for now?
No, it was just with the assumption that next week at the first read, these changes that we spoke about tonight will be implemented in that language.
What we've heard tonight, we'll go ahead and start working those in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Then no, I have no objection there.
Okay.
Okay.
Then we will move on to ordinances on second read. Ordinance 3455, an ordinance amending the Stillwater City Code by amending Chapter 41 Utilities, Article 4, Water Service, Division 4, Rates and Charges, Section 41-208, established. Those Roman numerals They're hard after we've been here for a little while. This is our ordinance regarding water rates outside the city limits. Any discussion, comments, or motion on this item?
Motion to adopt ordinance 3455.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance 3455. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Darlington,
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti,
Yes.
Councilor Redlake,
Abstain.
Councilor Jaworski.
Yes.
With a vote of 4-0 with one abstention by Councilor Wedlake, ordinance 3455 is adopted. We didn't have an emergency order or emergency clause in that one, did we? No. Okay. All right, that takes us to item 9, reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman.
Nothing to report tonight, sir.
Mr. McNichol.
One item, sir. The census is ongoing. It's very important to the future of the city of Stillwater. We would urge people, if you have not filled out your census form, please do so. There will be people going around to different apartment complexes here in the city in the next couple of weeks and trying to get students to report, as now required by the census, where they live full-time, well, where they live most of the time, which would be here in Stillwater, and not their parents' permanent address. So we would urge people again to make sure they've filled out the census, respond to those folks if they come knocking on your door, and respond to those things that you get in the mail. An interesting fact about the census, they put out a new fact every day. 100 years ago today, the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution was ratified in 1920, giving women the right to vote.
All right. Please fill out your census and vote. Those are both very important. The Stillwater Public Library is still Stillwater's Census Central. You can still get information at the public library if you need it on the census. Councilors, any reports for tonight? Is there
Mayor,
a motion?
I would like.
Go ahead.
I would like to mention to people that I told that we would have a discussion of renewable task force tonight, that I was obviously mistaken, and that will be in September on the 14th, or the first meeting in September.
And that is the 14th.
So I apologize.
Put that on the agenda.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Anything further? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the city council meeting. Teresa, please call the roll.
Mayor Joyce,
Yes?
Vice Mayor Darlington,
Yes.
Councilor Zanotti,
Yes.
Councilor Redlake,
Yes.
Councilor Jaworski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the Stillwater City Council meeting is now adjourned. I am going to take a short recess before we call the next one up, if that's okay with you all.
You're all that's left. I don't know that I've ever seen that view. I guess is that this camera right here behind the mayor? Right there behind my head. Well, I won't go to the phone. Everybody's got one.
Nobody was interested in the CETA or SUA meeting tonight, I guess. Feel those people.
Sure know how to kill a party, man.
Do we still have our online attendees? There they are. You guys ready? Thank you for the break. I guess we're ready at this point to call the Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting for August 17th, 2020 to order. Tonight on this SUA agenda, we just have a consent docket item. It is for the approval of a sole source purchase of UV system components for the wastewater treatment plant. Questions, comments, or motion on the consent docket?
Motion to approve the consent docket?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Teresa, please call the roll.
Chair Joyce,
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Westlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jaworski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, that consent docket is approved. Takes us down to reports from officers and boards. Mr. Dorman?
Nothing to report, sir.
Mr. McNichol?
No items here.
Trustees? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the SUA meeting. Teresa, please call the roll.
Chair Joyce,
Yes?
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Westlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jaworski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the Stillwater Utilities Authority meeting is adjourned. At this time, I will call the August 17, 2020 meeting of the Stillwater Economic Development Authority to order. Tonight on the consent docket, we have special meeting minutes from July 20th. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve consent docket.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Teresa, please call the roll.
Chair Joyce,
Yes?
Vice Chair Darlington,
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti,
Yes.
Trustee Westlake,
Yes.
Trustee Jaworski.
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, the consent docket is approved. That takes us down to item 5 under general orders. It's our annual report from Visit Stillwater. I see Chris Norris and Christy Morrison are joining us online. Good evening. Thank you for your patience. I'm going to say before you get started that the cover of your report has a picture of walk around on it, which I find offensive given the fact that we don't get to have walk around this year, which is really, really disappointing. But we certainly appreciate the work that you all have been doing in this terribly trying time. So I'm excited to hear from you on your annual report.
Well, thank you. It's been an offensive year since March.
Amen.
I do want to ad-lib something. I worked in a retail establishment Saturday on bid day, and was there for many hours, and I noticed 100% compliance on masks. Okay, so, and that was dealing with a lot of people that were younger than 20. Okay, so that was impressive, and I thought that was good to see. I'm Chris Norris, Chairman of Visit Stillwater Board of Directors. Thank you for your time at 7:30 p.m. I'll make this quick. You know, we gave you our annual report towards the end of July, and it kind of goes back to a Charles Dickens quote. It was the best of times it could have been, and it turned into possibly the worst of times the last 4 months, which I think a lot of us have dealt with. But one thing I want to focus on, I want to start in March and go forward, is our group transitioned from marketing to visitors to trying to market to our community and communicating with our businesses to try to do the best we could in a very trying time. Our staff called 200 businesses, sometimes daily, and at the least weekly, to find out what they were doing as far as restaurants, as far as delivery, curbside, when we were allowed to open, to the opening. And that was an ongoing process. And we went that way with restaurants, retail, and the recreational options around Stillwater. And I think it was a very effective transition. I think it was very necessary. I think that was something that was in our scope. And I think we did a very good job on that. And we had everything from daily updates to who was requiring masks at times that we did not have a mask mandate to give a comfort to people and things along that line. So I think we went an extra mile, but I think that should be expected on what we're trying to do. We produced tons of local videos that tried to highlight hot spots that were going on as far as retail, restaurant, and the recreational options. Kind of to give you an idea, our first 8 months, we were on track. We were well above 2018-19 fiscal year. And if we just could have had the 4 months, March through June, that would have been equal to 2019. We would have hit an $800,000 number. And I think that was significant because that was only 11 months. And I think you all remember the Oklahoma Tax Commission came in, and that was a very welcome addition to what we were doing, but we were only going to get 11 months because of a timing issue versus 12. And we would have hit the 800,000 number that was budgeted by the city of Stillwater. At worst case, we would have hit 800,000. I'll go into that in a minute. We were on track for May being, and I'm not trying to put salt in the wound, but May would have been our best May ever. And May's tough to beat. We deal with graduation, which is a continual. Thank God for the Special Olympics event here. We had that, but we had in addition to that, the Big 12 and the NCAA tennis championships that we don't know the numbers that would have brought in, but it certainly would have been significant. And we lost that. Part of it, we'll get it back. We're not going to get it back next year, but we will get it back with the help of our OSU athletics, and we will hopefully see that May number blown out of the water. But we had a chance to do that, and it didn't happen. To give you a little bit of an idea, for the full year, we were at 40% hotel occupancy, in which obviously would have been increased. And I'll go over some numbers there on the number of blocks that were canceled for March through June. To give you a side of a deal, and the thing we really appreciate, and the thing I think we talked about for a couple of years before it was passed, was the Airbnb. And the occupancy on Airbnb in the fiscal year for 2020 was at 53%. And I think that's significant because that's a number that would have been zero in the past. So, thank you very much for your help there. Still in the March through June category, we have handed out 30,000 masks beginning on July the 11th. And that has gone to roughly 300 local businesses that I've been around some of that. I think they've been more than happy to come pick up the mask and try to suggest mask wearing. So I think that was a really well spent number by the city on in their budget, and I appreciate you guys doing that. Talking about a little bit about the marketing and communications, we were ahead of or equal to trends on our deliverables until March, and I think you'll find that a very common number. But the good news is we were ahead or equal to. And we will get that back. We surpassed our goals for increased referred traffic from social media to the website and the increased number of social media followers. And I think that was real important when it came to March on how many people were checking our website daily to find out who and what were doing things, especially, I think from the restaurant side. I think that was a huge advantage, and I know what the sales tax numbers have told you, and they've been at least consistent. And I think that our restaurants, I know we lost a couple, but I think anyone with the drive-through and the curbside, they really helped themselves. Looking back on the year, we had 41 new events for our community. Now, not all came to fruition, but at least there were 41 new events. And we have continued to pursue the events we lost. And we don't have a number on how, but we have made a significant effort on that. We have tried to up grant numbers to secure these events. And we even went, I better watch how I say, we went and got an event that was supposed to be in another state, and they balked on them a little bit, and we were able to bring it here in late July. And I think it was a big event, and that's what we're hired to do. And I think I think you would be happy with what we did in that regard. We don't know what events, we did lose the NCAA cross country coming into the fall. We've lost homecoming, just part of it, and we'll get through it, and we'll do our best to continue to do these things and maneuver. And it's a state of flux and fluidity, and we just will do the best we can do. I know we are feverishly working to reschedule any events that were scheduled for the fall, for the spring of 2020, and try to bring them back to the spring of 2021. If we don't get it, it's not a lack of effort. We provided marketing service for a couple of things: $58,000 to the Stillwater Airport, $24,000 to Mary Main Street, and then $3,000 to the Stillwater Arts Festival that was canceled. But of course, we will do the same thing, hopefully in April of 2021. And we look forward to kind of a bounce back, and I think we all do. And I think we're going to slug through this, and we'll get there. But I think you need to know we're doing our best in doing what I think y'all hired us to do. And any questions, we'll take them.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate the breakdown and the report that you all provided. I do want to take a second to mourn a little bit over what you guys had helped develop in a lot of ways that we lost out here. from the baseball stadium to the tennis championship, which I know you guys had a big part in working with and trying to help bring that here in the first place, to the wonderful stuff we normally do in May around graduation and the Special Olympics. I mean, we had an unbelievable spring, summer, and fall planned for this community. With OSU events, with a football team that's was poised for a lot of great stuff, and it's honestly it just makes me sad to see the amount of things that would have brought visitors and tax income and all that kind of stuff, but more than that, just joy to the citizens in Stillwater that we've just not been able to do. And I know this is, as much as it pains me, I mean, this is what you do, Christy, all the time, and Chris, this has been something you've been involved in for a long time as well. And for folks who spend their lives doing visitor development, to have to deal with something that just completely cuts you off at the knees like this at probably one of what could have been one of the best years in Stillwater's history for this kind of stuff, is just, I mean, it's devastating. It's really sad, and it's I think we need to take the time to say that, and hopefully get through it. But the amount that you all have stepped up in pivoting and helping us out with distributing masks and keeping up with businesses and letting people know where they are and who's serving what and who needs a mask and all that kind of thing. I mean, certainly done a ton of really helpful work, and found ways to keep yourselves right at the forefront of helping our community, even with all of that stuff not here. So thank you very much for the work that you've done. And we, like I said, I know you guys are hurting just as much as we are over just the loss of what we've not been able to do together the last few months.
Well, and thank Christy. I know thank Christy and the staff. I mean, in a way you're sad, but in a way you're mad, and you just, I've got a thing, 7 rules of life, and number 5 is time heals almost everything. And, let's get some time under us and get to next year, and I think we'll be in a lot better shape. But
Yep.
It's certainly not been a lack of effort on anyone's part, including y'all's, and we've got no blueprint, guys, and we're all doing our best. So,
absolutely.
Anyway,
trustees, other
Chris,
questions for Chris or Christy about the report?
As you see going forward in the rest of this year, Christy and Chris, what are some things that we can still continue to partner on to help you, and what do you see the next few months looking like, and ways that we can collaborate?
Well, you got a vaccine right around the corner, don't you?
I hope so.
I hope so too.
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, Elaine, I think part of it is what we talked about in regards to things to do over the holidays. And you and Shannon came and met with our team, and we're excited about some things there that we'll get to announce pretty soon. And a lot of it is just relationships, so people don't forget about us, and kind of changing that cancel culture to the postpone and reschedule culture. And we have some pretty creative people in the office that we will do anything we can to help make it easier for people to reschedule. And if you have to reschedule again, that's what we do. Not a big deal. We'll just keep helping you do that, find available dates. And so of really just keeping those relationships and making sure people know that we're there to help them out.
And we're not losing an event because of lack of effort or lack of grant aggressiveness. I'll promise you that. If we lose, we lose because of size or something else, but we won't lose an event because of lack of effort or resources right now. Anyway?
Mayor,
Yeah.
I would like Councilman Peters staff that the issues that she did, the calling of all of the places. We cooperated on websites, and when it came to the mass distribution, it took her about 3 seconds to say yes. So it has truly been a cooperative effort in the last year, and we appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think you're right, Chris. You know, this stuff is going to come back. I think it's important for all of us to recognize the trajectory we were on. You know, we had a lot of momentum built up there before this thing hit us, and that doesn't go away. I mean, it wasn't by chance that we had that, and the importance of continuing to invest in our community and in community events and in visitor development is just going to be that much more important, you know, for us to come back and get back where we were.
No doubt. I would agree the fruits we were going to see was the results of effort, and that would have been the reward. Those rewards don't go away once things get back to normal and the effort continues. It's half full. We'll get back, but there's something that's dictating the time, and we can't dictate the time.
Don't we know it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we you know, I think we're all thankful to have the team that we have as we try to work through this. I know we're going to have financial concerns looking at what our hotel tax receipts look like, but you know, I'm sure we'll do everything we can to work together to figure out how to deal with those issues. And like I said, I mean, going forward, we'll figure out a way to get back those rewards that we were due this year, and it's good to have a team like you guys working with us to make sure we get there. So appreciate you being here. Best of luck. I think that's it. Anything else, counselors or trustees? Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Christy.
Thanks, man.
Are there any reports, Mr. Dorman? No, sir. Mr. McNichol? No, sir. Trustees? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Sita? Teresa, please call the roll.
Chair Joyce?
Yes.
Vice Chair Darlington?
Yes.
Trustee Zanotti?
Yes.
Trustee Wedlake?
Yes.
Trustee Jaloski?
Yes.
With a vote of 5-0, Sita is now adjourned. Thank you all for joining us tonight.